Hey there, Nicki Traikos here of Life I Design. I want to chat with you today a little bit about sketching for watercolor. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, how is that different from just sketching in general? When I teach sketching for watercolor, what I really have in mind as a goal for you is for you to get down the form and the shape as you're about to start to work on a piece before you start applying paint. So when you are sketching and working in your sketchbook, maybe just using graphite, you are putting down the form, but you're also thinking about value and creating depth and dimension and volume. But when you are sketching for watercolor, really you just want to give yourself that outline, understanding the form and the shape, maybe working out composition. So when you're sketching for watercolor, essentially what you're doing really is just creating your outlines, understanding where you're going to place everything, and then your watercolor starts to bring in the values and the depth and creating a bit of just beauty and essence to your pieces. So that's really when your piece comes to life. So the approach is a little bit different. Really, the muscle memory and the practice becomes more about understanding and studying what it is that you want to paint, and then you'll bring in your paint to draw in some value. Now I'm going to show you some examples from my personal sketchbook. Okay, so on my desk you can see I have two different sketchbooks. This one is a rebound created book by someone. I have to let you know who the maker is. It's not in the book, unfortunately, but it is just an old book turned into a sketchbook. So this book, the paper, it's really beautiful with the deckled edge, but it's for drawing using a dry medium. So I use this one just for when I'm creating studies and I just want to sketch and have fun and just have an ease in my sketchbook. So you can see that I'm using pencil to create the shape, so to build that form, and also to start to build in the values. So the values are the range from your lightest color to your darkest color, or your lightest shade to your darkest shade. Here I'm using graphite, so I'm not using color, but it is playing around with a bit of composition, thinking about, how does this, in this page, the botanicals, how do they flow? And then how can I create some depth and interest to them? So essentially, I'm not using any color. It's just pencil studies. So my sketching is to practice, again, form, to start thinking about how to build value using just, again, that graphite, so a single color. So you can see here where it starts to just come to life a little bit. And I'm relying on my graphite and the pressure and the amount of depth I can create to build that volume in my drawing. Okay, so when you want to watercolor, again, here's another great page. So again, I pick up things when I'm out in nature and exploring, and then I look at them and I try to build just, again, the volume and the depth and the value. And if all of those terms are a little bit confusing for you, I have sketching for watercolor classes. I have sketching florals in a book form. So I've created resource to help you understand what it is you need when you're working on your sketching practice, and also how to build that interest to make things look like they're three-dimensional, that they have that depth and value. So again, on this page, I'm relying on my pencil to create that volume and depth to make things look like they have, again, a little bit of a three-dimensional feel to them. With watercolor, when I'm sketching for watercolor, the process is a little bit different. So this is a sketchbook that is made for wet mediums. I think it's Speedball. Handbook Journal by Speedball. It's a good one. I really enjoy working on this shape. Go ahead and open it up to a page. Here we go. Yeah, it's a pretty good one. The paper is not bad. I'm happy with it. I would recommend it for sure. So as you can see here, you can probably see that I have very light pencil marks, pencil lines. So essentially, when I'm sketching for watercolor, I'm just sketching out the shape of what it is that I want to use paint to fill in and to create a little bit of that volume. This is a very sort of light wash, a very loose, it's actually one of my favorite sketchbook pages, but I can go back in and add more depth with my watercolor, just like I did with the pencil lines. I'll show you another one. Again, this is a page that I did during the fall. I had just references. Here's one actually that I used for this fern here. But what I did was draw out the shapes using a pencil first. So really, I just want the outer contour edge, and then I can use watercolor to build up that value, color, and interest to make it look like it's popping off the page. So when you are learning to sketch for watercolors, you don't necessarily need to have a complete picture in your sketch. You really want to work on just, the size to make sure that proportions are correct. You want to work on composition so that when you are laying down watercolor, sometimes it is unforgiving. There's a few tricks you can use to help correct things, but for the most part, it can be unforgiving. So you don't want to make as many errors in when you're applying the paint because it'll be harder to correct. So if you give yourself a really good outline, then you have the opportunity to be able to then lay down your watercolor. So this page is an example. I think it's for my sketching for watercolors class. Maybe it was my ideas that I was working out. I don't know. I've recorded so many classes. I can't remember exactly, but this would be what my sketch would look like before I started to put down watercolor. I would clean it up, of course, and I would lighten the pencil marks, but I wouldn't put in too much detail because I would rely on my watercolor to create that detail and to add that depth. Okay, I think that was the last example that I had for you. And again, this is something that I had sketched out in pencil first and then relying on the watercolor to go ahead and create that depth and dimension to the sketch. So this is hopefully helpful in your process for when you are learning to sketch for watercolor specifically. Remember, it is a transparent medium, so your sketch and your sketching process should be a little bit tighter in that you rely on very few lines to be able to create that contour so that you can start to bring in your watercolor to really build that definition and volume and interest. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. So before I leave you, one last bit of advice is to sit down with your sketchbook as much as possible. Once you start to create that habit and practice, you'll see just how uplifting that process can be in many ways, not only in your personal practice, but also in your ability, your confidence with whatever tool that you're working on, and play around with creating a looser sketch maybe before you add watercolor, or creating more definition in your sketch before you add watercolor. The most important thing is that you try, and especially if you're the type of person who feels like you can't even draw stick figures, I will link my class Sketching for Watercolor in the description. There have been so many success stories from students who have zero experience sketching and feel like they can only draw stick figures that they really lean into their sketching practice and are having some fun and success. So happy painting, happy sketching. And if you are new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. Please hit subscribe, thumbs up, and even in the comments, let me know what you'd like me to record next and share with you next. I will see you next time.